discovering answers to selling and buying property privately in WA. That's our topic this week. Welcome to episode 82 of Property Avenue WA, your independent avenue to a range of topics associated with property and real estate here in West Australia. And if you're wondering where my little mate is this week, and if you're watching this live stream rather than the podcast, well, he's having a little breather. He's been a busy lad, so he's not going to be on. We've had a few changes, and he's not going to be on every episode, but he still will be about, and we'll still be utilising. I'm talking about Oscar, of course, and so we will still be playing a part, but not necessarily. We're going to try and change up a little bit, and as of this week, you'll note if you're watching the live stream, I've got a friend of mine is going to join us today, and we're going to talk about private property, selling privately, and buying, of course, because that all comes into play. So there's a lot been happening with regard to real estate, but it's still happening associated with private sales. And so we've got some really interesting statistics, which our guests will introduce. But before I do that, it's really important that we refer to our disclaimer. So for those that may be watching live, but there's also the podcast comes out each Wednesday. And so we must advise the discovering, we'll get there. So our general advice disclaimer is that the information in this podcast is to be regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. We always advise and recommend, and today is a classic, you seek personal, professional, and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property, and investment decisions. And today's topic is a classic because you are looking at, if you are considering selling privately or you are selling privately, although you're going to do that privately, we would still recommend you get professional advice and independent advice, and I'm sure our guests will support that. So that's our little disclaimer that we do. So tonight or today, we've just, perhaps you're considering selling privately, perhaps you are selling privately, perhaps you're considering buying privately. Have you wondered where to start? You don't know what you're going to do. What's a concern? How does it affect you? The pros and cons of selling privately, and we will discuss those, not just the pros, but also the cons, and how does buying or selling really work? What's it do when you're selling privately? What does it entail? So there's a number of questions that we've got. So my guest tonight or today is Peter Verdiglione. Pete's a director. He's of the DIY operations of Agent in a Box. He's a part owner of the group, and Agent in a Box, for some of those that may be aware, is now WA based and WA owned. So the owners of Agent in a Box were originally from the East Coast, and I personally have had a bit to do with Agent in a Box, and so it's quite ironical that a friend of mine, being Pete Verdiglione, is now being involved, and it's now WA based, which is pretty exciting. So Pete, welcome, and thanks for playing a part.
Hey Tony, thanks for having me for the second time.
Yeah, but
good to be back.
Yes, it is. And the last time we were talking about what was happening in the real estate world, and I don't know whether was that last year, was that 2021? Might have been, but
I think early last year, I think.
Yeah, and things have sort of progressed from here, and now, of course, we've been having a chat about this, and we've put it off because you're obviously been a busy lad trying to get this all set up. So, and not only that have you got Agent in a Box, but you've also got a separate thing, because we're also talking about buyers and sellers, but also there's people that rent their property out privately. So you've got
private landlords. Yeah, I did want to mention it as well. Easy Rent, which is another DIY website that specialises for private landlords. So
yep.
I did want to mention that. I can touch on that a bit later as well.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
But it's good to have.
So how's it going in general? How's it? I mean, I know you've been super busy, but how's it progressing?
Good. Yeah, we've just recently got back into this space. We're only sort of 2 months back into it, and going well. Yeah, it's getting busier. I think February seasonally is a little bit quieter, but we'll start to pick up now.
Yeah. And because for those that aren't aware, Pete, you used to have. I mean, you've been in real estate for some 15 plus years, not just here in Australia, but you also had a group when we first met. We were helping a client, I think, and then we end up becoming chums and have our regular little coffee stints. But you had a group called Direct Move.
Direct move, that's right. And at that time, so that was probably, what, 8 years ago now?
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah, so back then there was literally Direct Move and another company called ANREPS, and we were the only two companies that were in the private or DIY space in Perth.
Yeah.
So it's good. I'm happy to report that bringing Agent in a Box over to WA, it's good to have another locally based DIY service here.
Yeah, and prior to going on with regard to, before we started this recording, it was interesting with regard to statistically you were saying, or you were showing me, the stats with regard to private sales in Australia, state by state. Can you just quickly enlighten us on that?
Yeah, so it's always hard to find solid information on private sales and statistics because traditionally, the private sale market takes up about 1% of the sales each year. But I've looked back at Agent in a Box specifically, and since 2013, so nearly 10 years of stats, and this is state by state listings in each state. Queensland is by far the biggest private seller state with 47% of the share.
Wow.
And then followed by WA and New South Wales on 16%. So Queensland is a massive market for selling privately.
Yeah, and that's selling privately across the board. Is that right? That's not just Agent in a Box, or is that Agent in a Box statistics?
Oh no, I've only got this information for us, Agent in a Box. Yeah,
okay.
Like I said, it is hard to get that sort of information on selling privately.
I know I had a bit to do with the previous owner, and I know with Craig, he was telling me at one stage, I think selling privately in Australia is not as dominant as it is. I think even New Zealand does more private sales than Australia.
I don't know what the numbers are. I'm not sure what the numbers are. So
no, I don't know. I had a feeling it was something like 5%, but don't quote me.
Yeah, could well be. In Australia, it's about 1.5, isn't it? I think of the total.
Yeah. But then in the UK and the United States, it's huge.
Much bigger than here. Yeah,
it's a much bigger marketplace.
Yeah, seems to be growing elsewhere except for Australia. So I'm not sure what that's down to. Whether the agents I'm not sure how that. I thought the DIY market would just be on a steady increase each year on year.
Yeah. I mean, and I suppose the thing that we need to get to, there's a number of questions and things that obviously people have to ask, but and a lot of my questions I've raised have been because, as you know, I do a lot of private work for people and preparing contracts, and people ask me to assist them with selling privately. Some of it, the people's choice is because that's just what they want to do. They've either had a bad experience or they are trying to protect themselves, and they're saying, well, no, I don't want to outlay all this money. What are you finding is some people's doing? Because it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Look, it's not for everyone, and that's not to say it's not hard, but it's certainly not for everyone. But you raised a good point. The two biggest reasons, I guess, or reasons why sellers want to sell privately is what you mentioned, that they had a bad experience with agents, and the second one is obviously keeping the commission. So they're probably the two biggest reasons to want to sell yourself. But so what I was going to say was the first thing I would tell someone before they considered selling privately, or once they start the journey, is to align themselves with a conveyancer or settlement agent that specialises in private sales. That's probably my number one piece of advice that I could give someone. And you would go with that, I would have thought.
Well, I've actually, as you know, I've got a business separate to the settlement agency, which is Independent Property Advice, Independent Property Advice Centre, and that's a lot of my work is associated with that. We're even assisting people where to start with regard to selling privately, and the first thing I advise is that, and I'm sure you'd be no different, is the fact of saying, well, you need to understand if you're going to sell privately, you're it. You don't have a real estate agent to fall back to. If you want to do a home open, you're the one who's going to do the home open. So you need to understand all these things. I think that's the part.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Tony, and that's very interesting because I get a lot of people that start the process and then they start to realise, gee, well, actually the agent was doing quite a bit of work. Putting the ad together, getting the photos organised, getting the property ready, getting the home opens organised. There is a lot of work that goes in that sellers aren't aware of, that the agents are doing. So so you're right.
Yep, and that's certainly the discussion I've had with people, and they go, no, and then it's okay. And then there's even been situations where people contact me and say, no, I'm not the agent. I'm assisting with you with regard to putting a contract together. I can assist you with questions you may have, technical questions associated with that you may have people have spoken to you about buying, prospective buyers. But the process and the home opens,
you're doing it all.
You're doing it all. My role in my background and my profession is giving you recommendations as far as conditions and that are concerned. And some of those conditions are not necessarily what the seller wants to hear. They are conditions associated with the buyer.
Yeah.
But they're things that people say. So what I've been doing, the other thing being too, with Agent in a Box, what does Agent in a Box provide when it comes to? So if I decide that I'm going to sell privately, what does that process occur if I contacted Agent in a Box?
So we essentially are the platform that allows essentially like an agent has a platform to get onto realestate.com and Domain, and obviously they're the two biggest websites that you need to be on. So we are that platform. So you would go in, you would log in, create your account, pay your listing fee, and it can be as little as $399 to sell your home. I'll throw that plug in there. And essentially you put your listing together. So you put your description, you put all the property particulars in, arrange your photos, and submit it for approval, and then we publish it live to the websites. And then essentially you're fielding all the inquiries and dealing with the buyers directly.
So there are some people that sort of go, oh, well, I don't want to do that, but they need to have some sort of to have their property listed on realestate.com and to go on Domain, for example, which are the two main ones. They need to engage Agent in a Box, for example, to be able to do that. Otherwise, they're not going to get their property on realestate.com, are they?
No, private sellers.
Not without a lot of money having to be paid out.
Yeah. So the main people that have accounts with realestate.com are, well, the only people that have accounts with realestate.com and Domain are agents. I think you can actually get a listing on Domain as a private seller, but it's not cheap. So you're better off, and it's much cheaper to come through a third-party portal like us.
There's a few out there. Figures?
There's a few companies out there like us that do the similar sort of thing. But we offer, the extras, like, if you want a signboard, if you want, obviously we're licensed agents, we can give you some support along the way. And there's plenty of selling tools and information on our website as well.
So you provide signage as well, Pete? Is that what you do?
We do, yeah. So if you go for the ultimate package, you get things like pointer signs and a colour photo board, things like that. So
okay, right. Yep. So okay, and when it comes to paperwork and things of that nature, does the client get that from you, or is that something that
we always remain outside of that transaction, and you would know the sort of the ins and outs of what we can and can't do. So we always remain further than arm's length on this transaction, and that's where our first bit of advice is always, align yourself with a good conveyancer or settlement agent, and obviously they can help you with the paperwork and from there on.
Well, I actually had a lady who hasn't sold yet, but obviously she was given got my name from you, in fact, and I've been talking to her of late, and that's where she wanted me with regard to assisting her with conditions and what she should put together, etc., etc. So I've been assisting her, and she's only just recently put her property on the market. So there's been a little bit of interest. I'm not sure how it's progressed in the last week or so, but I'm sure.
Yeah, I think she's got another open this weekend. So hopefully someone comes along. But that, you raise a good point there, Tony. If you're not advising them of these conditions that go in the contract or little things that they should be aware of, then that becomes a problem let's say once they get a buyer, they start negotiating. Contract write-up time can be a problem if they haven't got that advice beforehand.
Yep.
So that's where you come in.
Yep. So Pete, who's actually who are the sort of people that are engaging the services of doing private sales? Is it across the board? Is it a varying in like the properties that are DIY, as we say? Are they varying in different levels when it comes to price?
Yeah. Oh, look, there is no real norm, I suppose. I had a chap that just sold a property that was 1.5 million.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got a block of land someone's trying to sell that was on at 150,000. So there is no real, I guess, mainstream answer to that. You can have any value house or land or unit or someone just listed today 5 acres. So rural property. It's anyone can do it, and you just have to be aware of the sort of the interacting between the direct interaction with buyers. You don't have that sort of agent in between. So if you're aware of that and you're happy to do that, then it's easy.
And what's the competition like in this market? I mean, are there plenty of DIY operations happening? But I mean, there's only Agent in a Box. Is that the only one in WA? Is it not?
We are now the only one in WA, and there hasn't been one based here for probably the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But if you look at nationally, there's probably about a half a dozen, decent size for sale by owner companies. So all doing similar sort of thing.
Yeah. And you compare those, and you compare well as far as your size
In
compared
terms of our price point, if you want to list a house, 399 is pretty much the entry point. Yep.
And we mentioned about some understanding. I suppose the question that I get from people, they sort of go, I want to sell privately, but can you give me? I mean, I've got people that think that I'm a licensed valuer, I think sometimes, and say, can you give me what you think our property is valued at, or can you come and have a look at our property? So what do people do in that situation? Do you get that question?
Well, I get that. Obviously, I get that, and again, we unfortunately we're not able to get into that sort of side of it. However, if you go for our ultimate package, I think is our top package, which to be honest isn't much more than the 399. I think it's about 700 or something like that. We actually prepare a comparative report and send that out to the seller before they list, and then they can sort of see comparably in their area, within say a kilometre of their house, what's sold, and then they can sort of gauge, where they should be in terms of their price point.
Sure. Because I certainly get it, and I've even said to people, well, you can go on the sites and do a bit of a comparison, if you like, and see if what you've got in is similar in your location. You could probably go and ask for an appraisal, but it's probably a little bit unfair considering the fact you're going to do a DIY.
You can do that. You can get a couple of appraisals, a couple of local agents in, and then just choose not to use them. I mean, that's up to the seller that they want to do that.
And as we pointed out, I mean, but there is no agent, and I think that's the biggest thing that people need to understand. That when we say you, the owner of the property, if you've decided to selling privately, that's what it is. And so you're involved in the negotiation. And I've certainly had some occasions where people say, well, can you speak to the buyer about this? And could you? No, you've sold it privately. There are some things we will do as part of my service, which is that I'm talking about on a consulting basis, nothing to do with a settlement agency. But that doesn't mean that I then become the negotiator or you're selling privately, which means the buyer and the seller can talk to each other directly with regard to it. I think some people get uncomfortable, from my observation, with some of the hard questions, but that's the process.
Yeah, and I think those people the people that have a hard time, or the buyers that have a hard time dealing directly with private sellers, they're probably not the ones that are going through to the end of the process. So they're probably the ones that might make an inquiry, come to the home open, and then sort of decide, unless they've obviously fallen in love with the property, they probably move on. So
Yep.
9 times out of 10, we have nothing but good reports from both sides. Everyone's enjoying the process.
Same. We do a lot of work. I've certainly done a lot of work for buyers and sellers in that sphere for a long time.
Yep.
As I'm self-indulging here, but our actual settlement agency, we don't normally try and sell what we're about. We're not about selling anything, but just as a matter of interest, our settlement agency, Champion Bay Settlements, we're 40 years old this week, end of the week.
That's brilliant. Happy birthday.
My dear. So my dear, but we were hoping to sort of have a few drinks and do something, but of course with the WA restrictions, we've just put that on hold because it's limited what you can and can't do. So we'll just have to. I think the girls are going to organise a birthday cake in the office and have that amongst themselves. So we'll look at doing something.
So just Tony, can I ask a question with your private sales going through Champion Bay?
Yep.
What is there sort of a rough guesstimate on what percentage of the sales would be private compared to, say, what the agents are giving you, or is that a bit hard to
gee whiz. At the moment, it seems actually it's a good point. I probably should keep a tab of that. In the last 12, 18 months, I would suggest that, the real estate, obviously, market is still a very large market. It's still a significantly large market. But it is interesting the number of people and the number of contracts that we have been asked to assist. Now, in some cases, we've probably got to get this. You've got people that go and use DIY firms like Agent in a Box. So there's that. But there's also a lot of people that don't use those services, but simply identify a buyer, or a buyer identifies a seller, and then they come to us or they come to me and say, look, TV, we've going to sell out. We've got a buyer. We're selling our property privately. What do we need to do from here? So they've already discussed it.
That would still be considered a private sale, wouldn't it? That's still.
Oh, totally, absolutely, yeah. So what I'm saying is, they are the different areas of which that we cover, and then of course you've got the other situation where family members are selling the contract. We've had a situation more than once, which is a little bit disappointing in some ways, and I sort of get a little bit annoyed that the agent hasn't brought that to the attention of the clients, where they've gone, I'm going to sell my property to my son or my son-in-law or my daughter or whatever it may be, and then they've gone to an agent to get the contract drawn up, and they've signed a thing and have to pay a fee, right?
They could have just come straight to a conveyancer.
And weren't aware that, no, hang on, Barleys. So that's been a little bit disappointing. It hasn't happened. It's not something that happens every day, but it has been a disappointment that I've come across. That's just me. That I've gone, I'm sorry, in some ways, that shouldn't have happened. Certainly with what I do, I charge a fee, a minimal fee for what I do, depending on the work involved. But at the end of the day, with what I provide and the service we provide, plus the settlement side, you're still a long way in front. But certainly when it comes to private, you've got a situation where people have identified a buyer without even going to realestate.com. Then you've got the situation where they use services like Agent in a Box. And then you've got that related party type transaction, if you like, be it family members, business partners, or whatever they may, where they say, well, we don't need to engage a real estate agent. We don't need to advertise it. We've identified a buyer. We need someone now to put the contract together. So there's those three categories. In answer to your question, I sound like a politician, don't I? I go around in circles. But in answer to your question, it would be an intriguing statistic, but I would suggest it's probably, I don't know, it's probably around about maybe half to 1% of our settlements that have been private contracts in one way or another.
50%, you're saying?
No. Half to 1% of our total transactions. I'm only guessing that, Pete, but it certainly would suggest that the inquiries we've been having over the last 12 or 18 months, and probably longer, but certainly the last 12 or 18 months, there is a lot of private sale work that we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, 1% would sort of align with the national probably average of that size market.
Yeah, and that's just our office. I mean, I wouldn't compare to what we used to be. I wouldn't say we're a major office like we used to be, like a big office like we used to be.
Yeah.
We still do plenty, but our work is very much around our referral base. We're now dealing with second and third generation clients. And then, of course, my own consulting work, that I'm pretty busy with that. But again, a lot of that is referral work from other clients and existing clients and people like yourself.
That's good.
So it's the process itself. I mean, you've mentioned what the costs are associated with selling privately, and of course, they are significantly cheaper than engaging a real estate agent and a sales commission. But as we pointed out, what that means is it is cheaper, but you're going to have to do, you as the seller need to do a bit more legwork. Why do you think it is that buyers and, some buyers are not comfortable about dealing with someone who's selling privately? Have you got a thought on that?
Look, it's not a big ratio of the buyers that I just get the odd comment. I have to call the seller, or I have to deal with the seller. It's not a big proportion of the buyers, but you do get the odd one. So like I say, 8 or 9 times out of 10, not a problem.
Yeah, that's my experience too.
You probably get someone that's a little bit shy, that doesn't really know how to deal with an owner directly, and just prefers to have that agent in the middle. But it's not.
I think the other thing that that people need to be aware of, particularly sellers, is, and it's probably the world we live in, but unfortunately you need to be, if you're going to sell privately as well, you need to clarify and identify who it is that you're dealing with. You need to sort of identify this person and ensure, because there are scammers out there, and there are stories out there that are pretty ordinary. And I think when it comes to I want to buy. I've had situations, we've had emails and say, look, if you give us your trust account, we want to buy this property. We'll give us your details, and we want to put this deposit.
We don't want to miss out. We'll put a deposit in today.
Yeah. And I suppose my advice to people who are selling privately, look, we as a settlement agent, we as consultants, real estate agents are all no different. And from your experience being in the game for so long, you need to be so diligent as to who you're dealing with and who you're giving information out to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other benefit, Tony, of aligning yourself with a settlement agent at the start is the fact that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the settlement agent in most cases will hold the buyer's deposit in the trust account.
Actually, it was a question that I was going to raise. It was a question that I was actually going to raise. No, all good. Because
so I guess that probably adds a layer of security. If you've got a good settlement agent and you've sort of said to them, look, if we agree a deal, the buyer will pay into your trust account. So I guess that adds another layer of, a buyer sort of getting on email or the phone to a seller and saying, oh, look, I don't want to miss this property. I'll give you a $500 deposit. Give me your bank account details. I guess that takes that sort of risk out of it a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, it does. And of course, there's an ID process. And I think the fact is that, you need to be sure. And of course, I always say to Jude, she's a classic, with social media and everything now, if you've got someone there and you want to get their name and details, then in this day and age, there's not too much privacy around, and you can pretty much Google and identify who those people are in their background.
Wouldn't take long, would it?
No, it doesn't. And it's certainly something that, and look, you've got to, at the end of the day, you've got to look after your interests. You don't want to be a headline in the West Australian in 6 weeks' time, whereby you've lost everything and your bank account's been cleaned out because you were selling. I mean, we're not trying to scare people, but I think you've got to be diligent no matter what you do.
Oh, you just have to go in with your eyes open for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So it's they're the sort of things that we feel that you need to be aware of. Now, the other question, Pete, with regard to selling privately, was that what would you identify? I mean, obviously, there's always some shortcomings with regard to different things. There's pros and cons. What would you identify as being the pros when it comes to selling privately?
well, the pros, there's one big one, the fact that you keep the commission.
Yep.
But as you said multiple times, you have to work for it. So I'll give you an example. I recently had a lady in Rockhampton, Queensland, sold. I think she signed up on the ultimate package, $700. But within a week, had an offer and has sold, and she would have saved $30,000.
Yep.
Doing it if she had paid an agent. But
yep.
And locally, I had another lady that sold or went under offer in a couple of days, and I think the average in WA is probably 15 grand for a commission. So that's probably the biggest pro. I guess the other little pros would be the fact that you're in control, so you can sort of stipulate. Well, you only have to work out yourself when you want to open the property, if you want to open the property. So you've got 100% control over that side of it as well.
Yep.
I guess are you going to ask me what the cons are, or?
I will. But one of the things I'll talk about is about the pros. Is with what you were just highlighting. Then one of the things that I find really enjoyable doing when I have been engaged to assist people with private sales, or for that matter, engaged to assist people with buying privately, is that the clients, the sellers and the buyers are talking directly to each other. And so there's no, as I always describe, there's no Chinese eye feints. You're talking to each other differently. The messages aren't getting mixed up. And more often than not, I find that by private sales and purchases, the people have become they should have become really candid with each other. I'm aware in some cases where people become quite friendly with each other on the basis of that. Not
a lot more relaxed anyway, aren't they, about settlement coming up?
Very much so, and very upfront with each other, and also being able to work things out that suddenly a little glitch appears. Let's say they do inspections or whatever, and something occurs. Suddenly, things that are being managed and addressed in a very amicable and friendly and accommodating way.
Yes, I can speak with my years of experience as an agent. There's nothing worse than getting to the final inspection, and more often than not, you're on the phone to the vendor saying, "Oh, you haven't done this, you haven't done that," and there's always that sort of conversation when you're the agent. But like you say, there's a lot more. They're more relaxed, and they're obviously asking the question, "Do you want this to stay? Do you want us to take that?" And it's a lot more relaxed, the whole situation.
Yep. And look, as we say, we're doing this. The purpose of Property Avenue WA is that it's independent. So we're not saying, we're not doing this particular episode because we're saying don't deal with real estate. I mean, the other question that I have here is that, okay, you're in a situation, Pete, where you're going the way of selling privately, and now of course the borders are open. Things are a little bit different. Suddenly I decide I haven't sold my property. I've got it on the market privately, but there may be a reason that I've got to go away, and I'm going to be away for a period. Or you're getting to the point going, you know what, I don't know whether I really wanted to keep doing this. That person, that seller, then still is able to go and engage an agent to sell that property through a real estate firm. Is that right?
Yes. And there is no drama with having the property on privately yourself and having it on with an agent. I mean, preferably the agent will want you to have it just with them. Just to make, obviously you're going to pay their commission. So, but there is no problem. You obviously do get the people that sort of try it and they're not successful for one reason or another, or they find they haven't got the time, and they'll end up giving it to an estate, to an agent. But and that's just natural. That happens.
Yep. And yes, certainly we've had people going, oh, this is not quite working out, or it's a little bit more difficult than I thought. So for those that are aware, and of course the other way around, of course, if you're with a real estate, you're going, you know what, if you're not happy, I've certainly had that situation. People aren't happy with what's going on. No, I'm disappointed with what I've experienced. I'm interested in selling privately. How do I go about it? Then that can be done too. So it works both ways.
Absolutely.
But as I say, we're emphasising the fact that we're not here telling you that that you shouldn't use a real estate agent, because that's not what we're saying. We're just giving people awareness of the different things that are out there.
There's other options out there. Yeah,
that's it. That's
definitely.
it. So what are the things that that people that you've identified when people go to sell privately that perhaps they were not aware of? Are there things there that when people knock on your door and say, "Hey, we want to sell privately," are there, when you start talking to those people, are there things there that specifically people weren't aware of? Oh, hang on, we didn't realise that. Are there specifics there that you'd raise there for people?
Nothing sort of that comes to mind that would be a major change of tact if I've talked to someone. Most people have a basic idea of what they're getting into. Some people I've talked to think that they can sell privately from a different state, or they're not in the same town as the property. That is a bit confusing to me as to who's doing the home opens or showing prospective buyers. So
yeah.
So selling a house privately, or a unit or investment, whatever, that you're not near is difficult, I would have thought.
Yeah. Unless you've got a family member or something. I've had one I've had more than one, whereby they've got a family member or someone in that particular location, and they are doing the home opens or showing.
Someone has to be there to let the prospective buyer through.
Which is, and that's one of the things with regard to why you engage a real estate agent. If you speak, particularly if you're out of state or out of the location, you would engage a real estate agent. It's not such an issue with the settlement agent. Settlement agent can be anywhere in WA, but the real estate agent, you engage a real estate agent because they're there, Johnny on the spot in that particular town or that particular suburb.
Definitely,
which makes things a little easier. It's probably a little bit different in the metropolitan area, because if you're in Subiaco and you live in Joondalup, then you've just got to make the time to travel from Joondalup.
Exactly.
To get there. But that is one of the advantages with regard to engaging a real estate agent rather than a private sale.
That's true, yeah. And there's not really anything else that I sort of bring up that people haven't sort of considered. I guess what some people sort of, when their idea of marketing is probably a little bit different to say what an agent's would be as well. So taking a few photos with your iPhone and putting them up is probably not an agent's idea of professional marketing, that sort of thing.
No, and in fact, it's interesting you say that, because I certainly, when people inquire with me, I've got a couple of contacts in that area and I've deliberately established networks in that area because of the inquiry I get from people. And the first thing I say is, look, as much as you might think you're taking a great photo, get someone, for the sake of a couple of $100, get someone who will take professional photos. And not only that, Pete, the other thing that there's some of these professional photographers will do for, I think, you're probably looking at $250, $300, which is not a lot when you're trying to sell your home for $600,000, $700,000, $500,000. That these guys also are professional. They know they get the right shade, they get the right shadows, etc. But also the guys that I've done, they do drone photos. So they can take a photo, particularly because there are people from, and don't forget, we're focusing on WA property. Property Avenue WA is about WA property. But there are people from the East Coast looking. I had one the other day who wanted me to have a look at the thing. So I took some video of the street, etc., because they wanted me to have a look at, they were looking at this property, and they got photos on the realestate.com of the home inside and a few outside shots. But that was it. And these people want to know is, well, can you give us an idea of what the street looks like, what's in the area, rah.
That's good.
Because there are lots of people, and Oscar and I have been discussing this over several episodes, and we certainly believe that will be the case now that the borders are open. There'll be more people, because it's affordable here in WA, there'll be more people from the East Coast looking, who are, not will be, they are already looking at buying property in WA.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that
I think we are the
information,
cheapest. I think we are still the cheapest of any capital city at the moment.
we are indeed. We are indeed. Yep. So our affordability, and with the borders opening, that's only going to change. I still think we'll be affordable, but certainly the interest shown by the East Coast is going to step up. And when the international borders open up, probably even more so again. So
Yeah.
getting photos and getting them done professionally is a really, really important part of the process, in my opinion.
Oh, look, definitely. Yeah, like you say, for the cost, the small cost that it is, it's worth a lot more at the other end, definitely.
No, that's not a service that Agent in a Box provides, is it?
We don't. No, we don't have in-house photographers or anything like that, and we would certainly just recommend that they find someone local. And there's a couple of national companies that operate in most towns and cities as well. So
yeah,
I think that's something that's probably again a relationship between the seller and the photographer. They can organise that much easier.
Now, Pete, if someone sells privately and they do a home open, with the restrictions here in WA, the COVID restrictions, what do people do if they decide to have a home open? They've got the same rules as a real estate agent with regard to restrictions and QR
limit
codes,
on numbers. Yeah, so there would be, you'd have to, I've not been through this personally, but I would imagine you'd have to register and have your QR code on the way in. And I don't know what the specific or the latest numbers restrictions are at the moment, but you certainly have to just keep an eye on that as well.
No, because it changes that regularly. I'm unsure myself, but we can certainly check that. We can certainly check that, and we'll put that on our Facebook page. I'll just put a note there regarding that. But the other thing being too, Pete, is that I do know with the QR codes, you can download those on the website, on Google.
Oh, easy,
yeah. And then you check, but you've got to have people, and masks are required when you enter the home for inspection.
Yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely.
So, under the current restrictions, that is here in WA.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I'm not sure, state by state, it obviously varies, but we only need to worry about WA. So
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I was going to mention about selling privately, so there was that. When it comes to selling privately, people say, well, I'm going to sell my house privately. They need to ensure that they've got their property prepared properly too. I mean, that's an important facet, isn't it? I mean, I've had people come to me and go, oh, it's not. I said, well, yeah, you need to get your place prepared. You either got to make a decision what you're going to do, which is no different if you're going to deal with a real estate agent, having that property properly prepared in readiness for sale.
And I think again, a good point is, what's the first thing you do when you start getting agents to come around and do a evaluation or an appraisal? You start tidying up the house and mowing the lawn and things like that. So
yep.
You're right. You have to just basic things that don't cost you anything, declutter and lawns and a bit of paint maybe, and just tidy up. That's definitely strong recommendation on that for sure.
Yep, agreed. And I think the fact is that if there are things that need repair, don't try and take shortcuts in this market. You need to, if you want a good price, then you need to ensure that you've got that property in pristine condition. And taking shortcuts. Oh well, I can't be bothered. I'm not going to fix that. Well, you may find then you can't expect the premium price that you think you're going to get if you're not prepared to go and do the things that need to be done to ensure the place is right.
And obviously be aware that some buyers do buy the inspections, the building inspections, and that probably comes on a list of maintenance items that needs to be addressed, and then you probably find that you'll get some sort of renegotiation with the price as well. So you can avoid all that, like you say, by just spending that little bit extra at the start.
Mate, while we're on about home opens, are there any little tips that you'd recommend as far as a person, if someone's going to sell their home, wants to sell their home privately, and then they've done all the bits and pieces, they've got their photos up and running, you've addressed your bit and loaded it all up onto the system, and suddenly there's people inquiring, and people are obviously you go into realestate.com and you can identify how many people have viewed your property.
Yeah.
But then you put a home open. You want a home open. What are the things that a person should do when it comes to home open? Obviously, advertise that they're going to have a home open. But are there any little tips as when that should be?
So I would probably suggest that you give the buyers enough forewarning. So I would have thought, midweek, mid to the end of the week. So by Thursday, you have your home open times up. Yep. There's also another little tip on realestate.com that you can go in and actually check when direct comparables to your property, when they're open. You can actually, on realestate.com, it's got a search function there, and you can actually see when other home opens are open. So people like to see as many properties as they can at the same time. So I'd recommend that you open at the same time as others, and also keep your home open times fairly short as well. As a private seller, it's easy to sort of fall into the trap of thinking, I'll open for an hour and a half because I'm home and I'm here. But what it does is it just demotivates a buyer to want to come along and have a look. So if you keep the home open times short, get them motivated and wanting to come through and crossing over with other buyers, that's always a good one as well. So.
And the other thing being, Pete, with regard to that is they should also, I would suggest, have some sort of signage so people know where that property is, because you've got to remember, not everybody's in your street that's going to buy your property. There's people that have probably never been to that suburb, or in some cases, people that have not even been in the state before, and suddenly helping them to identify which home it is that's actually open. Yeah,
so what you're talking about is your classic pointer sign or home open pointer sign.
Yep.
So we supply that sort of thing. It's just a little core flute on a stake. And obviously the other recommendation is, if you're selling privately, to have a for sale sign. As sort of menial as that sounds, that, like you say, identifies the property, and you might find that someone driving down the street sees it, and certainly with a home open, they'll see the pointer signs as well. So highly recommended as well. Yep.
The other thing being is, with regard to COVID, I got back before, but we get to the point of we've got a buyer. I think what people need to understand, particularly sellers, is to have, I think, and you tell me otherwise, but I think to have if they can create a little bit of a package so that it's there, which identifies, which has got a contract together, and perhaps a list of some annexures or a list of special conditions, because the conditions that are required on a property, some buyers will be going, okay, but if you've already got all that there, they can take that away and go, well, this is all prepared. I know I would certainly recommend in this current climate that you would have an annexure to cover COVID, particularly when it comes to delay in settlement. It becomes, let's say you've got people in the property, and let's say a week or two prior to settlement, suddenly those people are tested positive and are identified with COVID, with the restrictions, and so it goes. So there are annexures that I believe that should be forming part of the contract, when it's not just a case of buyer, seller, purchase price and settlement date, but I think you need to go and ensure that you've got a range of different annexures, and certainly the COVID one to protect, because that could impact on your timeframes when it comes to settlement.
Absolutely. Definitely agree. And again, one of the main benefits of having a conveyancer at the start is getting that advice, because as a private seller, you're not necessarily aware of all those functions. So and the thing that I think as well that people forget, so we're doing it privately, so it doesn't have to be such a big issue, but time frames are still important. And my recommendation with regard to that, particularly when it comes to subject to finance, I know I've had several people in the last few weeks who've sort of said, oh, well, we've got pre-approval, so it should be really easy and simple. And I've sort of had to explain to the buyers, look, you've got pre-approval, but the bank, all that's doing is, the lending institution is letting you know how much you can go out and spend.
and they're saying you qualify, but it's still nothing formalized, and it doesn't really make things, it makes things a little quicker, but it doesn't take a huge amount of time off the time frames because you've got pre-approval, because the bank won't do any sort of formal processes until they've got a contract.
Yeah, that's right. And also, sellers need to be aware of when someone tells them cash, is it cash or is it mostly cash and still getting a loan, that sort of thing. So, all these things are advice that you would definitely be able to help with. And
the other thing being too, I think the other part is that's all well with the seller, but of course, as a buyer, don't get caught up in the trap to say, I'll put an offer in for cash just so I can guarantee I'll get it. Because I know I've spoken to people that are concerned because they keep on missing out.
Yeah.
And they're going, oh, I looked at this property, but I got picked at the post. But if I do the next, I've got pre-approval, I'll do a cash offer. No. And the reason being is cater for the what if. If something goes pear-shaped, pre-approval, as I keep on emphasising, is only that. It's not guaranteed finance. It's telling you that you qualify for finance, and it's assuring you that you should get finance subject to a number of things. But if you put a cash offer in and something goes pear-shaped, you've got a problem because you've got no protection.
The money's due, yeah. You've got to come up with it.
So do not, please, if you're listening to this podcast, please do not go and put an offer in for cash if it's not cash. If you're borrowing in some way, shape or form, that needs to be identified on the contract.
Yeah,
and when it comes to the settlement process as well, when I talk about timeframes, most lending institutions will not, their timeframe is 28, 30 days from the date of finance approval before they're ready to settle. Settlement agent might be able to do it quicker than that and prepare everything, although everyone's super busy at the moment. But the timeframes are not what the settlement agent is telling you. It is what the banks require, the lending institutions require. So I think you need those things you need to be really, really aware of and careful of.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously buyers are at the mercy of the banks, and there's not really much anyone can do about it. So
yeah. Just quickly, Pete, because I'm looking at the time, but when it comes to the deposit, that's the other thing that the seller needs to be aware of. That deposit is not your money. So I've had a couple of situations where people got paid a deposit and then, oh, good, I want to go and buy this. I'll put that down as a deposit for the place I want to buy. Not at all. That is not your money.
No. So again, my recommendation would be that money, the deposit money, gets paid into your conveyance's trust account. Yep. And you don't take receipt of that money.
Yep.
That would be my strong recommendation.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, mate, I think I've covered just about all the different questions I had and the different things that you raised. Is there anything else that you raised or you want to point out with regard to buying or selling privately?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. I just wanted to make another plug for my website, easyrent.com.au.
Oh, yes. Actually, I just apologise too. You know what I haven't done? In my haste, because normally when I've got my little offsider, I've got some time to do some things on the keyboard. I just forgot to put your logo up there. So there it is.
That's
and I'll make sure
I'll let that slide.
Yeah, so yes, about Easy Rent. Let me know. Tell me.
No, so if just for any private landlords out there, we've got a management subscription management service that. It's a listing tool as well. I mean, agent in a box, you can list your rental, find a tenant. Easyrent.com.au does the same thing. But you're also able to run ledgers and do tenant screening and things like that. So it's more for your seasoned private landlords. So that's a good service as well. And that product is $29 a month to have that, to run your own ledgers for your properties. So I thought I'd just plug that as well.
Absolutely, that's the opportunity to do that by all means. With regard to Easy Rent, is there a lot of that private landlords out there?
No, there are, and especially because we deal nationally, there's a lot of landlords with multiple properties, which is great for them. But they do. I would imagine that they spend a lot of time just doing that. So there's a lot of just mums and dads with just one property that still need you still need to if you don't have a property manager, then obviously you need to look after it yourself. So we just have the tools for that doing it yourself.
So Easy Rent's providing the tools to manage that. So if you're managing that yourself, is that what it's doing?
That's right. Yeah, running your ledgers, tenant screening on the way in. So just your management tools. It's all in the one place.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Well, maybe we'll get those things and we'll post those on our pages so that people can find that on our Facebook page and our Instagram, whatever, and we'll link up your Facebook page with Property Avenue WA. So and my little partner in crime with his dedicated property management, but as he agrees, I mean, there's not some people you can't do 100% of everything, and so there's always other alternatives, and that's I mean, if you've made that decision to do it privately, then it's important that you do it properly, and if you're going to do it, then you go to Easy Rent to get the tools to help you with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Mate, fabulous. I really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to come on board and to tell us, discuss the process with private sales, but also the fact that congratulations that you've now established or re-established Asian in a Box in WA. And we wish you well, mate. Then obviously we'll get you back on again sometime and see how things are progressing. And I'm sure there's other things that people will raise and question. So it won't be a one-off. We'll ensure we'll get you back on board. And because there's other facets of your business that you're doing as well, isn't there?
So we will. At the moment, we're doing just DIY operations. So we will be sort of branching out into traditional agency as well within the next 6 months. So
but we'll keep in the loop. We'll definitely be in touch.
Yeah,
and I'll touch base with you when we're doing our next coffee run.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, and happy birthday again, Tony.
Yeah, thank you. Well, looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I won't be there, but pretty proud of it, and I'm sure my dear dad will be pretty excited about it. So for those that are, thanks a million again, Pete. So those who want to know, so we can get this, there'll be a live stream as you'll be watching this, but also our podcast is available on iTunes, Buzzsprout, and Spotify, and of course various other podcast platforms. So that'll be available on Wednesday, tomorrow, Wednesday, and then you can download all the past episodes. 82 episodes we've done now, Pete, which was something amazing that we just did off the cuff. Yeah, so we're now doing it fortnightly. So we'll try and get some interesting guests. But for those who want to check out, if you want to ask any questions or you've got any issues, you can contact us via those mediums. We're also Instagram, Twitter. And we haven't got a LinkedIn yet, but I'm getting someone to sort it out to do that. But we'll work on it. Pete, thanks again, and good luck, mate. I appreciate your time.
Appreciate it.